Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sunday Morning Live at All Saints Church. Apreciados amigos y amigas, qué alegría que estemos todos juntos aquí en la Iglesia de Todos los Santos. Mi nombre es Mike Kinman. My name is Mike Kinman. Soy Rector. I am the Rector of All Saints. Pronombre él. My pronouns are he, him. It's great to have you here at the forum, which is our kickoff to Sunday Morning Live. Want to start off with a few announcements before we get into the forum. As many of you know, our Sunday food table is continuing here at All Saints Church. Erica Tamblin was here this morning handing out 129 $10 Ralph gift cards, as well as 54 masks. And so if you want to donate Ralph's gift cards, and those are the ones we need because people can just walk over to the grocery store and use them. You can mail them to the church at 132 North Euclid, or if you're out already, don't make a special trip, drop them through the mail slot by the door facing the quad lawn. Thank you very much. Our partner in love this morning is Union Station Homeless Services. And so we're asking everyone to donate to Union Station Homeless Services, and that is going to go in the chat. Union Station is an amazing provider of services to those among us in our community who are struggling with homelessness. So please, please support Union Station. And then we do hope that you are staying home as you are able to stay home. And we know that home is not always a safe place for everyone. So if home is not a safe place for you, please let us know. And then also in the chat, we're going to post some resources for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, how to get in touch with folks there, and also the Trevor Project, which is an amazing organization helping LGBTQ youth. The hotline is a great way to stay in touch with people, and particularly if you're in crisis, to call and to get some help. We are thrilled to have in our forum today Scott Budnick. Scott Budnick is the executive producer of a whole bunch of films, including the ones in the Hangover franchise. Now that would usually be the most impressive item in someone's bio, but not for Scott. He actually left the entertainment industry to start something called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And that is an amazing organization that works to end mass incarceration in California, and that helps so many people with reentry after incarceration. And in fact, we're going to post a link in the chat here where you can give to the Anti-Recidivism Coalition because they are absolutely worthy and needing of support. But that's not all Scott did. Then he founded One Community. And One Community co-finances feature film and TV programming to support social impact campaigns. One of the first projects that One Community worked on was the film adaptation of Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy. And I know a lot of you have read that book and seen that movie. We actually connected with Scott through our own senior warden, Juan Mejia. They came together through another pretty remarkable story, which was the freeing of Frankie Carrillo. Frankie was wrongly imprisoned for 20 years before being freed thanks to the Innocence Project. And they both worked with and became friends with Frankie. And actually, if you want to learn more about that story, you can go on over to Netflix and check out the Innocence Files. I think it's episodes 3 and 4 right now, tell Frankie Carrillo's story, and you'll see Juan in there as part of that. Anyway, all that is to say that we are thrilled to have Scott with us in the forum. Welcome to Sunday Morning Live at All Saints Church, Scott. I'm sorry we can't literally be face-to-face, and grateful for your time and presence.
Thanks for having me, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers on the chat here.
Absolutely, happy Mother's Day to everyone. Scott, I've sort of given sort of a framework, but would sort of love it if you would kind of fill in some of the blanks and kind of tell us your origin story about how did all this happen?
Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. And dad was a doctor at Emory. Mom was a teacher, ended up graduating from Emory and hightailed it out to Los Angeles to get into the film business, and came out and moved into the Oakwood apartments on Barham Boulevard and began looking for a job. And it turned out it took me months and almost ran out of money, but finally 6 months after I moved out here, I found a job with a young director named Todd Phillips on his first comedy that he was directing called Road Trip. And I ended up working on that and then Old School with him. And I just kind of realized like my career was kind of going way up and everything was going well. but I realized that there was something that I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I wasn't feeling happy. I kind of felt trapped in a bubble of the entertainment industry, and every phone call and every dinner and every conversation was about actors and directors and writers. And when I grew up in Atlanta, I mean, we were a family that were always kind of being of service. And that was a huge part of kind of what our parents taught us. And so a friend of mine that I knew in 2004 invited me down to a juvenile hall in the San Fernando Valley in Silmar, and asked me to come be a guest speaker in a creative writing program. And I said, that sounds like an interesting Saturday morning. So I went down and I went into this juvenile prison. And the first thing I witnessed was a tiny 9-year-old kid in handcuffs and shackles being escorted by 2 officers. And that was just really a jarring sight to see. And then we got into the units where we were teaching the class. And I sat down at this table with a bunch of teenagers, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. And I turned to the kid to the left of me, this little kid named David. And I said, how was your week? Are you doing okay? And David said, it was a really tough week. I just got sentenced to 300 years to life in prison.
Yeah.
And he was 15.
Yeah.
And I said, what happened? And he said, I stood next to my friend who shot the victim in the butt. And for standing next to my friend and being an aider and abetter, never even touching the weapon, I got multiple life sentences, and I'm heading to prison for the rest of my life. And I have no chance of ever coming home. And as I went around that table and heard the stories of how many of them were in foster care, didn't even have one parent to love them, right? How many of them had witnessed domestic violence in their household? How many of them had been victims of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and trauma? I just realized that, like, before these young people became victimizers, they were all victims, right? They were all victims of nothing we would ever wish onto a child. And I also realized that, like, if this was our child, like, he'd be out on bail. So he wouldn't be sitting in that jail because we could afford to let him out of bail and have him sleep at home. And he would have the best lawyer in LA, and he would not get 300 years to life for standing next to someone. But David was. And I told those kids that day, I'm going to start teaching this class every Saturday. I'm 100% in. If you're committed to changing your life, I'm committed to being there to help in any way I can. And I jumped in. And it kind of I became the movie producer that was kind of also doing this. That same day in that class, a kid named Adam was there, and he was going to prison for 6 years. And he said, Scott, I want my mom to forgive me for what I did. When I get out, can you please help me? I said, absolutely, call me. And he called me when we were in pre-production on The Hangover. And I said, listen, I'm giving you a $12 an hour internship. Show up early, work your butt off, run circles around people, and be hungry. Mm-hmm. And our call time was 6 a.m. Adam got there at 3:30 in the morning.
Fantastic.
Ran circles around everybody, attitude of gratitude. And at the end of it, our prop master said, I'm taking this kid to Ironman. I'm putting him in the union. Adam went from $12 an hour to $48 an hour. All 4 of his brothers ended up getting into the union. They lifted their entire family out of poverty. They're the hardest workers I've ever seen, incredible young men. And this just became my life. And that's kind of how both things started.
Yeah, and so you really actually used the industry that you were in to try to, and that's the other thing that happens is it's an industry that frankly has had some diversity issues in it as well, and so you're using it to try to get people jobs, and that's fantastic. So is that what ARC was about? How did you find ARC and sort of how did that do? And was there a public policy piece to ARC as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think what I found as we started, and me and some priests and some Jesuits and some teachers and some pastors, all were trying to help kids that were coming home, right? And at first it was kind of one kid at a time. And let's find housing, let's help someone find a job, let's help someone into school if someone needs therapy or healing or restorative justice with their victim or parenting classes or whatever it may be, right? It was just helping one person at a time. And we started doing these retreats over the weekend. We went to go to like El Capitan Canyon in Santa Barbara. And at first we had 30 of the young people we worked with that were now 18, 19 years old, that were out, and bringing together just a positive support group, helping them enroll in school and get financial aid and all these things. And really, it grew to the point where we had about 150 young people who were all incarcerated now out in the community. And we had started this kind of de facto, really positive community for them of people that are all kind of going in the right way with their lives. And it got to the point where, I mean, a couple things. One, it kind of became so big that like there needed to be some infrastructure to support it. All of us volunteers on our own couldn't do this. And two, I just kind of found out after Hangover 3 and after seeing 12 Years a Slave, I was just getting so much joy from this side of my life, and I was not enjoying making comedies as much. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Todd Phillips and I said, I need to leave and start an organization. He was gracious. He supported me 100%. And I left the film business, took a 90% pay cut, and started ARC, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And really what we do is kind of fivefold. One is providing a support network for folks that are coming home. Number two, providing direct services. So we have housing programs, mentorship programs, school and college and university programs, work and career trainings, healing and therapy and therapists. And so the direct service piece, but what I really realized is with a direct service piece, you can help one person at a time. But with policy change, you could really change how a system operates, right? Mm-hmm. And I was watching this system of when someone's getting out of prison, just giving them $200 in a bus ticket and saying, have a nice day. Mm-hmm. And we know that people, especially people coming back to the same neighborhoods that they kind of got in trouble in and don't have the support systems in place, needed so much more than $200 in a bus ticket, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting. A couple priests that worked in the juvenile hall asked me to come up to Sacramento because there was a bill in the Capitol to end life without parole sentences for juveniles. We are the only country in the world that would sentence a child to die in prison. Mm-hmm. No other country in the world. Mm-hmm. And for 7 years in a row, they were trying to pass a bill that would end this sentence and give the only 300 in the entire prison system, kids that received life without parole, a chance to go back to court after 25 years in prison and show the judge that they have changed, transformed, and redeemed. And for 7 years in a row, no Republicans and 12 Democrats wouldn't vote for the bill. And then we went up there in one day, and this is just a crazy story. We walk into the Speaker of the Assembly's office, and as soon as I get into the office, this is my first time in Sacramento, there's a photographer, there are hangover posters on the table, and he's asking me to sign posters. I've never signed posters in my life. Yeah. And so we do the whole hangover thing, but then he says, why are you here? And I introduce him to the folks who are all in prison that had gotten out, were now in colleges and universities, Loyola Marymount, at UCLA. Blew his mind. He said, here's the 3 people, legislators, I want you to go talk to. We went and talked to those 3 legislators, got their commitment for the vote, and after 7 years and one day, we were able to vote to pass the bill, and Jerry Brown ended up signing the bill. Wow. And that bill helped the 300 people in prison. We then did a bill that expanded that to 25,000 more people in prison that got life sentences as young people. And the greatest ending of it is I got to walk into Ironwood Prison and talk to David Negretti, who got the 300-year to life sentence that I met the first day, and say, David, guess what? We just passed SB 260, and now your 300-year to life is now 25 years to life. And now you go to parole board in the 2020s. Mm-hmm. And because David did so well and graduated college and stayed out of trouble, right before Governor Brown left office, he commuted David's sentence, and David now goes to the parole board this year. So it was an incredible journey through ARC. And even though I took an enormous pay cut, it was the absolute best 5 years of my life.
Yeah, and you know what you're telling stories of relationships, and I'd love to hear from you about some of the relationships and how they've changed you.
I mean, I think everything, what I've learned, Mike, is that this is all about like humanity, right? It's the humanity of everybody involved in this system. And if you don't look at this as human, if it becomes to a district attorney or to a judge or to the people that, or even a public defender or someone that acts in the system, if it does not become human and it's just paperwork, right, it's easy to kind of discard a life, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, there's horrible crimes that happen, and the worst crimes that happen in the world are what hits the news every night, mm-hmm, right? And I understand why the public's scared, right? It's not, the redemption stories are not the ones that hit the news. It's the worst crimes in America every night that we get beaten by. And if we don't see this as human, then it's really easy to just say, lock them up and throw away the key. And it's the stories of the people I've met, not only that have changed me, and this is really what keeps me going in this, but it's the stories that I see change people. Like, no matter who I bring into a prison, it could be a Democrat, it could be a Republican, it could be a member of law enforcement, it could be a victim of crime. No matter what they've thought for their 40, 50, 60 years of life, when I bring them into a prison and sit them down in front of a human being who may have committed a horrible crime in their youth, but had spent the last 20 years, 30 years in prison, redeeming, transforming, growing, being a mentor, graduating college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you sit in front of a human, no matter who it is, they change. I'll give you one example. Yeah. Had a wonderful woman named Maggie. I call her Aunt Maggie. And she went through something that I could never even imagine. Her husband owned a gun store and was murdered during the commission of a robbery. They beat him over the head with a pipe and he died. And she had to lose the love of her life. And it was juveniles that did this robbery. And Maggie was the one, when we would go to Sacramento and talk about second chances, that would always be against us. But I met with Maggie. I loved her heart. I was horrified by the story and what she had to go through. And I said, Maggie, will you come to juvenile hall with me? And she came down to my class in juvenile hall and she was really nervous, right? A lot of kids who committed violent crimes. And she had gone through what she went through, losing Ross, the love of her life. And as she told the story about losing Ross, some of these kids started crying, realizing the pain that they have caused others, right? And as she started crying, they got up and started putting their arms around her as she was telling the story of Ross. And at the end of it, she ended up hugging them and staying in touch with a couple of them, right? And I tell the story just to say, like, if Maggie could have that experience, anyone can have that experience. And when it becomes human, that's when everything begins to change, right? And everyone's kind of hearts and minds begin to change. And that's really what kind of springboarded me to go back into the film business and start One Community.
Well, yeah, and that's the power of redemption and love. And so let's talk about that. You're living and seeing these incredible stories, and then you're also someone who understands the power of storytelling and media, and how minds and hearts can be changed. So what was that transition? What led to starting One Community? And tell us a little bit about One Community.
You know what? It was really interesting. I had someone that said to me, like, I'm glad that you started ARC, but you left the biggest tool in your toolbox. Like your ability was to tell stories on a massive scale that reached people all over the globe. And you could do this and generate an incredible empathy if you tell this in film and television. And I realized that, like, the last component of ARC was that narrative change and culture change component, right? Our members that are now 1,600 formerly incarcerated members, when they would go out in the community and talk to churches and talk to community groups and talk to law enforcement and talk to prosecutors, people would always change the way they felt. And the second thing that happened, which was really interesting, is that I met a guy that was very involved in the political movement for marriage equality. Mm-hmm. And I said, when I met him, I said, how did you go from gay marriage being illegal in 50 states to being legal and basically a political issue that's off the table?
Yep.
And I said, what were the game-changing moments? And he looked at me without missing a beat and he said, Will and Grace. Yeah. And I said, what? He said, Will and Grace, Glee, Modern Family, Ellen DeGeneres on TV, and movies like Brokeback Mountain and Milk humanized, normalized gay culture and gay marriage over a 10-year period. And people who were deeply opposed to gay marriage every week were hit by this funny, cute gay couple on Will and Grace. And by the end of it, either they supported gay marriage or their opposition was softened. And to know that this type of culture change on a commercial television show could lead to equity and equality for people that were gay was just like transformational for me. And I thought about my experience with those in prison, and I thought it very much aligned, right? If I could tell the stories in film and television, in documentary and digital that could move people's hearts and minds around all issues of inequality. Like, yes, we're talking about criminal justice, but we see the foster care system and how that feeds into that. We see poverty and economic inequality and how that feeds into it. We see broken educational systems where kids, especially poor kids, deserve so much better, right? We see a huge equity gap with women and girls. We see how we treat the homeless and those who are addicted or struggling with mental health issues. We see how we are kind of dehumanizing immigrants and refugees in a lot of rhetoric, right? And I think in all of these issues, not taking a combative approach, taking a unifying approach, right? To me, this is our country has become so divided, but there's so much that binds us together, right? Mm-hmm. Around values, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's if we play in this space of values and not in this partisan divide, right? That's where people kind of share a lot of stuff together. And so that's how One Community was born, and that's how we got started.
Yeah, and we see so much media being used today to divide, and the power of the stories that you're talking about to bring us together and to change really every heart. As you said, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, or what. When we meet each other and see each other as human, we're changed. And so how do we do that? And so you started One Community, and first of all, like, what you got about $50 million in funding right away from this. What was your pitch, and how did it work?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. It took 3 years to get the first dollar in. I mean, I was going around pitching this and pitching this and pitching this. And I thought this entity in China was going to be my lead investor, and it didn't happen. Kobe Bryant, bless his soul, was going to be my lead investor. And that didn't work out, but he stayed a close friend and a confidant. But ultimately, I finally found a lead investor. And the pitch was really like using, like, a lot of folks talked about cultural change and narrative change through film, but it was really being done through documentaries. Mm-hmm. And I'm an enormous documentary fan, but documentaries, no matter how incredible they are, don't get the marketing support and the distribution support that they deserve. And I was watching films that I was doing, like The Hangover, getting 50, 80, $100 million spent just on marketing alone, right? Mm-hmm. And I said to all these foundations, as well as to billionaires that cared about certain issues and others, I said, Matt, you want to change hearts and minds around this issue that you deeply care about. And you've been spending money around cultural change and narrative change that really you can't really measure what the change is. Imagine if you had a Warner Brothers or a Netflix or a Fox or a Disney that were taking a story, an empathy-driven story about the issue you care about, and spending $50 to $100 million selling that movie to the world, right? And it ultimately reaches hundreds of millions of people. Now that is leveraging your investment. That's leveraging impact and narrative change. That's ultimately what my pitch was. And Just Mercy was just starting to percolate. A friend of mine named Gil Netter had bought the rights to it and had set it up at Warner Brothers with Michael B. Jordan producing and starring. Right. And I was the biggest Bryan Stevenson fan forever. He was a friend. He was an idol. He was a hero. And we did a lot of panels together. And knowing that if we got this funding, we could invest into Just Mercy. A lot of folks were excited about that. We ended up getting the funding. We ultimately invested in Just Mercy. But the huge sell of the company, Mike, was we're not a film and television company. We're an impact company, right? Mm-hmm. And if we're going to invest into this film alongside Warner Brothers and others, then we are going to run the most impactful campaign, philanthropic, political, around helping the criminal justice system, creating a more fair justice system around the world, right? And really specifically focused on the US. And so separate from the money we invested into the film as co-financiers, I raised millions of dollars to run what's one of the largest impact campaigns ever created around a film called Represent Justice. And representjustice.org is the campaign around Just Mercy. And it was incredible. We ended up screening the film for 12 governors. And now we have another 12 governors that we're screening for virtually online. And I would sit in a room with a governor that controls mass incarceration in their state and would literally have to give them tissues at the end of the film. If you've seen the film, you know how moving it is. And then we would sit in the theater with them and their policy advisors and talk about legislation to run. And our team is now running legislation in those states with those governors, Republican governors, Democratic governors, right? And that was something really special. We did, we had an incredible mic. I'd love this church to be involved in the future. Yeah. We had an incredible faith campaign and had Justice Sunday where Just Mercy was discussed on Sundays at various churches. And we even had formerly incarcerated folks in the pulpit on Justice Sunday.
Oh, sign us up for that.
Yeah. It was incredible. We ended up having a faith call the week before the film came out with about 1,500 pastors. Brian Stevenson and Jamie Foxx and Michael B. Jordan joined. Got great help from Bishop Jakes and Rick Warren and others around the country that were involved. And I think another thing I'm really proud of from the Just Mercy campaign is we really looked at like who changes culture in the country, right? And we started screening the film for lots of basketball teams, NBA teams. And I would go to these various screenings and I would sit and talk to the team about criminal justice reform. So they would be educated, all the players, and Brian Stevenson would sometimes show up and have these conversations. And then I would go to the games and see, like in Oklahoma City or in Milwaukee, an all white, largely Republican arena that, and even in Oklahoma City, they said a prayer before. They're the only arena that says a prayer before the national anthem. Yep. And then they watch these teams, mostly players of color, right, who care so much about issues of criminal justice reform because of the communities that they grew up in. And I realized what cultural influencers these players are in these communities, right? And we then were able to take a few teams and do an initiative called Play for Justice, where we took the Sacramento Kings and the LA Lakers and the Milwaukee Bucks and the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Portland Trailblazers into prisons to play basketball inside prisons, and then to sit in circle with those who are incarcerated and have deep healing circles and mentoring sessions. It was incredible. We had the MVP of the NBA, Giannis Antetokounmpo, in a Milwaukee prison with all of his teammates, with his coach, with the governor of Wisconsin, really? Suited up in a Represent Justice jersey, the 75-year-old or whatever he is, governor of Wisconsin, playing basketball with the incarcerated men, with Giannis and with the players. These are the men that the governor can commute. This is the governor who could change criminal justice policy, who is playing basketball and in deep healing conversations with the men inside to see their humanity. And so these are just a few of the things that we did around Just Mercy to make incredible impact. And the campaign keeps going. So definitely check out representjustice.org.
Well, what we're doing. And we want to get on whenever you're doing another round of that, we want to get in on that. And, one of the things we see happening now, and I'm interested in what one community is doing, what we're hearing from folks in our community who work in the film and TV industry is that they've been doing post-production on a bunch of stuff for the last, 6 to 8 weeks, but really soon they're going to run out of sort of shot content. Yeah. And, I think about what is the possibility. So much content is like, we already see it like with Saturday Night Live doing At Home and various other, John Oliver and other people doing that. What is the possibility of, individuals and churches and other people gathering talent and doing what you're doing, which is creating visual content to tell stories that can move hearts and minds?
I think this is, we are seeing, this crisis is awful, but you also see it creating so much opportunity, right? And I think to be able, even the fact that we're sitting here doing this, yes, we could be doing it in person, right? But I wonder if you're going to see an increase in attendance now that so many people have now been able to tap in to this. And And we see so much happening digitally now. We see so much happening online. So many of our films are going to move to streaming because of how it might take a while for the theatrical experience to bounce back, right? We're going to see television, just digital content. Like I'm seeing so much incredible 2-minute videos, 4-minute videos, animation that people are creating that are all kind of to make impact, right? And it was so interesting seeing recently, we've all heard the story of the black jogger in Georgia that was killed while on a jog, right? And for 2 months, there was not an arrest in the case. Obviously, the perpetrators were white. It was South Georgia, where I'm from, by the way. Our summer vacation home is 30 minutes from Brunswick, Georgia. So I know Brunswick very, very well. We hear that the district attorney told the police department, don't investigate this. But it was an outcry on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, right? An outcry. And it was so incredible. I posted it on Instagram, and it was the number. I mean, I've never seen people react to this like anything I've ever posted. And it was so incredible to see that the reaction was not just from the Black community. It was Black, it was white, it was brown, it was Asian, it was Native American, it was Democrat, it was Republican. Everybody was horrified about a human being that was treated like this, right? And remnants of racism that still exist really prominently in the Deep South. And
here too,
right? And a day later, there was an arrest. And it can be completely credited. And yes, it's great that LeBron James and Michael B. Jordan and every kind of influencer on the planet got involved in that day. But look at what an entire world, like the comments I got from all over the world, forget just the United States, it's incredible. And so, yeah, I think this provides for an enormous opportunity for people to reach people in a way like, who knew what was going to happen to Zoom? I didn't use a Zoom before this. Right now I'm on 10 a day, WebEx, Zoom, right? And so the opportunities are huge to really reach people with storytelling, with culture change, narrative change, and we're content creators and artists kind of are king right now.
So Just Mercy, you talked about the campaign that's coming around that, the Represent Justice campaign that's happening around that. And that's obviously going to continue. Is there another film or TV project or projects that One Community is working on right now?
Yeah, there's a few that I can't talk about yet, but I probably could in about a week.
Well, we'll have you back.
And I think the one that I'm thinking of that you're about to hear, that you will hear about soon, has deep themes. I wouldn't say it's a faith-based film, but it's a film of deep faith. About a major kind of cultural figure with a major movie star playing that figure, already shot in the editing room right now. And so I'm excited to tell you about that when I can. We just bought a book, an incredible book called King Leopold's Ghost.
Oh, yeah.
Heard about it from Ben Affleck. And it turned out that Ben Affleck wanted to direct this and Martin Scorsese wanted to produce it, and no one had scooped up the rights. And so we were able to partner with Ben Affleck and Martin Scorsese. It's about King Leopold of Belgium, who decided he wanted an African colony and ended up coming in and said it was a religious mission, a missionary mission. And ultimately, he enslaved the people of Congo and had them make rubber. And when they didn't make enough rubber, he cut their arms off and cut their legs off. But the film is not really about that. The film is really about the first ever human rights campaign where Black Congolese and Black Europeans and Black Americans and white Europeans and white Americans banded together to expose King Leopold and overthrow him, which they did. And so I'm excited about this because so much of the stuff we're developing right now is domestic and takes place in the US, and to do something that takes place kind of globally with partnering with talent like Ben Affleck and Martin Scorsese is something I'm really excited about.
Well, and this is, I mean, you talk about the Congo, and certainly it's still absolutely going on there, and it's going on in so many places that we have been a part of colonialism there. And so to raise these issues through film, again, it's just inspiring the power of that. I want to jump into some questions. We're getting some. First, I want to bring on, I don't know if you know Michaela Ron. I'm going to ask her to start her video. Michaela founded an organization called LearningWorks here in Pasadena. There she is. LearningWorks is, well, I'm going to let Michaela just say a little bit about LearningWorks, but she has worked with one of the young people that you've had a great impact on. And Michaela just wanted to come on and sort of tell the story and say thank you. So, hey, Michaela, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hi,
Hey,
Scott.
good
How
to
are
meet you.
You know me from LearningWorks and you know me from Homeboy. And we have
Yeah.
our common friend who was at LearningWorks, our high-risk school for kids, who at 17 was convicted of 16 years. And Scott's a true hero. I know the All Saints community loves me and loves Homeboy, and LearningWorks and ARC is just amazing what they do. Anyway, Scott is the one that got his sentence commuted by the Governor Brown, and got out after 9 years, almost 3 years ago.
Raul.
And you gave him housing on day one, and he worked at LearningWorks on day one. But I wanted to tell you, Scott, big celebration this week. This guy is graduating with a BA in sociology from Cal State LA at the end of the week. And it really is all because you walked with him. And I just want to say, how was it walking with him? And how was it walking into that governor's office where the day before I asked him, what do you want now that you got out of prison? And he says, I just want to pet a dog. And he pet that dog in the governor's office that very next day.
Butter.
So thank you.
Yeah, well, Micah, first I want to thank you for giving Raul the love and support and care and chance. And it's just been incredible seeing his growth. I met him in Somar Juvenile Hall when he was 15 or 16 years old, facing a life sentence. I watched him get sentenced. I watched him go to a level 4 maximum security prison and have to fight for his life every day, but stayed out of trouble. And was able to get him to a lower level prison, and just watched Raul once he got to that lower level prison, Ironwood Prison out by Palm Springs. It was a prison that had the largest kind of college program in the state. And seeing Raul thrive, seeing him become a little nerd, little college kid, seeing his love of academics and his love of learning, seeing his love of mentorship and helping other younger kids coming in. He was 21, 22 years old, helping the 18-year-old that was entering prison pick up a college book or the Bible instead of a knife or some heroin, right? And Raul was a huge part of the kind of culture that exists on that yard. And then, I mean, I kept sending to Jerry Brown names of people who were just like, pay attention to this person, pay attention to this person. And Jerry Brown commuted 500 people. I think 100 of them were folks that we sent him before he left office. And now Gavin's done a bunch also. But Raul was one of them. And it was amazing. Raul was there with a kid named John Rodriguez who went to Venice High School. And both of them got commuted on the same day. They're the first two people that Governor Brown commuted to walk out of the door that day. They got a call. They both had like 10 more years to go. And they got a call to the program office. They went up there, and it was Christina Lindquist from the governor's office. And she said, congratulations, the governor just commuted your sentence. And unlike everyone else who still has to go to the parole board, he commuted your sentences to time served, and you're going home in the next 24 hours. And I got that collect call from Raul and from Johnny, and then got to watch them walk out of prison a decade early because of the men that they became. And then I said to them, I'm going to Sacramento next week to meet with the governor. Do you want to surprise him? And a week out of prison after like a decade inside, they were on their first airplane ever, I think.
Yep.
They were on Southwest Airlines with me, going to Sacramento, staying in the Citizen Hotel like royalty. And I just remember like our walk to the Capitol. I have all these pictures of like them with a big dome behind them. And we walk into the governor's office, and they're so nervous. And they walk in, and, you know, Jerry Brown is so disarming. He just wants to ask a million questions. So they sit down with Jerry Brown, the man who commuted their sentence, and they tried to thank him. He said, "Stop thanking me." And all he wants to do is ask them, how do we do this for more people? How do I get more people to change? Why do I have to wait 20 years for people to change? How can I convince them to change in 5 years, in 10 years? How do we do this? How do we do that? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? Like million questions. And I remember with Raul, like the dog was like at his feet the entire time. It was either Sutter or Calusa. I think at that point, both dogs were still alive. And the governor's grabbing Raul by the hand and showing him pictures of his father. And it was remarkable. So thanks for those memories.
Hey, I think you're amazing. Keep up the good work. Keep it going. Your heart is exactly where we all should be. So thank you.
Yep.
And thank you, Michaela, for everything that you're doing. And of course, it's a good time to plug in. We're supporting Learning Works in lots of ways, giving lunches for the staff during the week. And also you can drop off non-perishable food items, diapers, wipes, formula, all that stuff at Learning Works 90 North Daisy from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Weekdays. So drop by Learning Works. And actually the person who's coordinating those lunches is another one of our parishioners, Elizabeth Lashley-Haynes, who's also an amazing public defender. And I want to bring Elizabeth on here just for a second and say, hey, Elizabeth, and say, is there something that you got for Scott right now?
Hi.
Hey,
yeah, this has been
guy?
great.
I want to know who that guy is first.
That's Lex.
This is Lex.
What's up, Lex?
Thanks so much, Scott, for updating us on everything about ARC and everything you've been doing. It's really amazing. Being a public defender in LA County, you know, going through this COVID thing and my clients and seeing them on a daily basis, a lot of my clients becoming positive for COVID. Maybe you could talk, I want to know your opinion and if you could help educate the general public about our numbers of incarceration have gone from 17,000 in LA County to roughly about 11,000. And the crime rates seem to be also down. So maybe what's your opinion about from the inside what you're seeing with this mass incarceration, how we have 17,000 people in LA County incarcerated. And now, you know, one of the silver linings of this pandemic has been seeing us decarcerate. And you know, do you think this has been a lesson for the general public about all the thousands of people that never really should have been incarcerated in the first place? Maybe you could talk about what you see about the incarceration and mass incarceration and now the de-incarceration.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think everything you said is right. There are a lot of strong interests that want to create a lot of fear right now that the crime rate's going to go through the roof and why are we releasing this person or that person? The truth of the matter is we've locked up so many people in California, not that we're scared of, but that we're just mad at, right? And I think there's a huge difference there. Like if there's someone that we really should be scared of, they need to be locked up. If there's someone we're just mad at and they pose no danger whatsoever, I think we need to look at other options. And I've seen incarceration make people worse, re-traumatize people. So when you're throwing someone in where there's a million other diversion opportunities, people that are mentally ill, people that committed low-level felonies, low-level misdemeanors, et cetera, I don't think they should touch the system. I think 100% of the time the system makes them worse. But the interesting thing that nobody really understands is that the lowest recidivating population in the entire criminal justice system in California are the lifers who committed violent crimes and have been in prison for decades, years, decades, et cetera. The non-violent person recidivates at a pretty high level because it's mostly addiction. The recidivation is usually not people crime, it's property crime, but they recidivate at a very high level. If you committed a violent crime in your youth and you've been in prison for 20 years and you get out through the parole board, the recidivism rate for that population is 0.5%. And that's held steady for 30 years. Yeah. So less than 1% of people that committed violent crimes and went to prison for a while ever commit a crime ever again, where about 70% of anyone else getting out of prison end up coming back within 3 years. And so I think number one, yes, we should absolutely talk about not having people that commit low-level crimes or the mentally ill ever touch the system. Let's find them treatment in ways that don't re-traumatize them.
Right.
But also let's look at people who may have done something awful in their childhood, but have shown that they're capable of redemption, that they're deserving of mercy. And let's look at them too. It's politically very easy to talk about the nonviolent offender, right? But it's not politically easy to talk about someone that committed a violent crime. But they're the least danger to the entire public if they go through the parole board and they end up coming home. And I think this crisis has shown we have a lot of people sitting in our jails that are there just because they don't have money and they can't afford bail.
That's right.
Right? Almost all the 179 participants and their family members on this could afford to bail somebody out most of the time. Why should we be able to get our loved one out the day they get arrested, but someone that doesn't have money can't? And that person has to sit in, even if they're innocent, sit in that jail for years while they fight that case. Like, that is just, to me, if you talk about economic inequality, that's incredible. So yeah, I think this crisis has shown us some huge opportunities, and it's time to really kind of look at those for the long term.
Great. Yeah, I have one more quick follow-up.
Great.
So as I've said, since we've been decarcerating, crime rates have been going down, but yet I want to talk about the media and that for a second, because of course the media latched on to that one case that became all the rage all of a sudden, of one guy who happened to pick up several property crimes in a row. And it leaves me to be debating with communities who are saying, oh, look at this, now everybody's out there committing crimes. And I said, look, the media picks up on it because it was one aberrant situation. And so, I mean, when will we ever reach a place where the media accurately portrays what's really going on and says, look, crime rates are actually going down, and doesn't just latch on to the one hot button story that's really just fear mongering people? And like, how do we ever get to a place where the media appreciates the good stories about criminal justice reform and doesn't just harp on the one terrible thing that happened?
By the way, what courthouse are you in?
CCB.
My second home. I don't know the answer to that question, but you're exactly right. It is the absolute, it's what the media does. It's what the news media does, right? And it's the whole reason for my company, right? Is to tell those stories in a much wider way, in a much more global way, in a way that reaches way more people than the news media. The problem with the news media is they can hit people every night, right? And so figuring out television programming, television content, getting those stories of redemption out through digital media, through documentaries, through film, through television. To me, I don't think the news media is ever going to tell. It's really what sells. So I don't think they're going to change. But I think it's combating that with some of the incredible positive stories. That we have 1,600 members of ARC, and our recidivism rate is around 5% compared again to 50, 60, 70% nationally. And so again, those are the stories that normally don't get told on the news, but those are the stories that we tell in the ways that we tell stories. So thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Elizabeth. We're actually starting to get some questions, and we got about 12 more minutes. And so you can use the Q&A function for questions. Scott Dennis asks, All Saints has an active ministry to help youth in foster care. What do you believe are some of the best strategies to prevent foster care youth from ending up in the prison system as adults?
Listen, I think what we've seen, all the evidence point to us, what works with the youth that we work with, half of whom came out of the foster care system. We asked the folks when they're coming out of prison, like when we first started, because I didn't want to be the white Hollywood movie producer that told them what they needed, right? We asked them what they needed. And I said, what's the number one thing that you need when you come home? And the number one thing that they said was love, right? We need love. We need a positive community of love. Mm-hmm. Second, they said housing. We need a safe place where we can go, where we can thrive. Third, they said mentorship. We need mentors in our life, like the 177 people on this chat. We need mentors who are parishioners, who are teachers, who are pastors, who are people in the business world to help guide us, to be there on our good days and our bad days, and to really show us the way. Fourth, they said school and career. Like, a job is a job. That's never going to get us out of poverty. How do we transition into careers? And so at ARC, we created the largest construction union apprenticeship program. We've placed hundreds of people into construction unions. I've told you the story of Adam in the movie and television unions. We've now placed dozens into that. We have the first ever firefighting program with CAL FIRE for those that have come out of prison up in Camarillo. We send dozens of people to universities, community colleges, et cetera. And obviously, probably that's what they said, but the most important component really is healing, right? Getting past trauma of the past, therapy, et cetera. To me, all the evidence points to those things being what really changes a person. But whenever I hear the story of someone who's changed their life, and I said, what did it? 9 times out of 10, they tell me a story about one person that cared, one person that was consistent, one person that wouldn't give up on them. And that's almost always the common denominator.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that actually is, we're getting some questions in. Walter Little says, one thing I find fascinating about Scott's story is how the catalyst for what has become his life's work was the invitation to spend a single Saturday, low investment. Had that person not invited Scott, the rest of his story might not have happened. How many other people may just be waiting without realizing it, that they might also change the world?
Wow, that's incredibly poignant. Is it Walter that
Yeah, Walter. That?
Yeah, Walter. I've seen, everyone on this chat has, obviously at the very least, you're a member of this church, right? And I've seen...
Found us somehow, yeah.
Yeah, right? Forget your career. You're a member of this church. And I've seen the religious volunteers that come into Sylmar Juvenile Hall, the prisons, the jails, be one of the most transformational forces of anyone inside these facilities. Whether it's just low touch, sitting across from someone for an hour and just having a conversation and showing that you care, or whether it's groups like Prison Fellowship, I'm losing my mind on, Rick Warren has something like Prison Fellowship.
Well, and we have something called PRISM, which is our prison ministry here in the Diocese of Los Angeles. Yeah. Great.
Love that. I mean, those prison ministries, there's even like Toomey, the Urban Ministry Institute inside prisons are training the men inside to become pastors, right? There's seminaries inside prisons, right? So just being a religious volunteer in a prison or jail or juvenile hall that's 30 minutes from your house, 30 minutes from your church, right, is where I started, is such an easy kind of low touch way to get involved. But each of you have a career and have something that you can teach somebody inside to give them that skill, to give them that hope, that inspiration, to give them something to focus on or to study towards. And I've been able to do that with the film and television business. But there's so many others that can just kind of impart knowledge and wisdom. And so I would say anyone that's interested here, reach out to ARC. The executive director of ARC is now Sam Lewis. I'll type his email address in the chat. And if you're interested in getting involved in being a mentor, volunteer, et cetera, I suggest you reach out to Sam. Interestingly enough, I was the CEO of ARC. Now the man that took my job was someone that spent 24 years in prison from 18 years old. And he really is outdoing me. He's one of the greatest executive directors I've ever seen. I'm really proud of him. So his name's Sam Lewis, and I'll type his email right here.
That's great. So someone asked, how does someone connect with these programs, either to refer inmates to the services or to work with them? So you could just contact Sam and ARC for that.
Yeah.
So, and then I also put in the chat the information about PRISM Restorative Justice, which is our ministry with our siblings in exile and incarceration in the Diocese of Missouri. Brother Dennis Gibbs, Sister Greta run that. And it's amazing. A lot of All Saints people are involved in that. Crystal Jones says, wow, King Leopold's ghost, ambitious. I'm wondering if Scott has any interest in doing work that actually investigates the origin stories of the perpetrators of racism, sexism. For instance, can we see the horrors of how human beings can turn into the King Leopolds of the world? That type of Eurocentric self-examination seems even more important these days.
Yeah. Hey, Crystal, it's fascinating. And I think it's something that people need to learn and understand because that's how we prevent it, right? And so if there is a book, an article, or some type of source material that can kind of kick off the development of a film or television show, shoot that in the chat. And I'll have my team start looking for stuff as well.
That's fantastic. We had Elizabeth on a minute ago, and she's still on here. What have you learned about the work that public defenders and DAs are doing to help the youth at risk?
You know, it's been really interesting. I found champions in both places, believe it or not, and most would look at like Juan Mejia as someone that prosecutes people and sends them to prison, and me as not like your most natural allies, right? But Juan, in the DA's office, has really balanced his job to fight for crime victims and protect public safety with justice and proportionality and fairness. And I have found DAs in the office that exhibit those same qualities. I think we've had a problem with DAs throughout California who, for many, many years, decades, centuries, have been unwilling to embrace any reforms. And I think that's gotten to a point today where elected district attorneys who have opposed every type of reform are getting knocked out of office. And they're seeing this happening. And so the ones that are still in office are beginning to change their tune a bit. And so I think finding that balance is key. And obviously, my love and respect for public defenders is beyond words. They are overworked, they are overburdened, they are underpaid. They are champions and fighting for those that have nothing and no one, and are doing it with caseloads that are beyond what any human can do, with vigor, with passion, with excitement. Obviously, there's people that don't do that, but the vast majority of public defenders that I've worked with are some of the greatest lawyers on the planet. And now seeing some of them, and Elizabeth, hearing a bit from you and my friend Tiffany. I'm sure you know Tiffany.
That's my good friend.
The kind of firepower and seeing defense attorneys really kind of coming out for policy change, also not just being incredible defenders of their clients, but also coming out to fight the system and fight injustice, I think is really incredible.
Great. Elizabeth, you want to jump on anything you want to add to that or respond?
No, I just appreciate everything Scott's saying. You know, Tiffany's one of my best friends, and we've actually met before when we were doing a lot of rallying around our stuff. So, you know, we fight hard every day, and we really love building the community connections that we are building, and we're really trying to get out there and build bridges with all of our community partners, you know. And just like this weekend, one of my great community partners is SE Justice Group. And
incredible.
I've been working tirelessly with SE Justice. They've been doing the majority of the work, but they're doing the Black Mamas bailout this weekend. You know, every year they work to raise funds to use cash bail to bail out a Black mother, because we all know the outrageous rates and the, you know, disenfranchisement and how terribly Black women are hit in the criminal justice system. So, you know, just today, SE Justice Group and a bunch of other community partner groups are down at CRDF, which is the women's facility, having a rally about bailing out Black mamas. And thank God, one of my clients is going to be the recipient of this.
Oh, that's
and
incredible.
she's going to be coming home, $200,000 cash bail raised by our community partners, so that my client can go home and be with her 2 children. hopefully by tomorrow we're rallying together. So I think it's the joint effort of the public defender's office with all of our community partners that we're really able to have the most impact. So
That's
I appreciate
amazing.
ARC and all these other organizations.
Hey, Mike, I know you need to wrap it up.
We got like,
because the
yeah,
children's group is
any
starting.
last
I just
words
wanna-
for us? We got to have you
I
back.
just want to say one thing, Mike. You mentioned Frankie Carrillo
Yeah.
and episodes. If you haven't watched episodes 4 and 5 of the Innocence Files, please do that
They're amazing.
right now. I just wanted to give one more shout out to Juan Mejia. If it wasn't for Juan Mejia as a district attorney coming forward and saying our office made a mistake, and a bunch of other incredible defense attorneys, Frankie would still be in prison as an innocent man, and it took 21 years to get him home. So I just want to give a shout out to all the work that everyone's doing. Juan Mejia, I love you, brother.
Well, we love you too, and we love Juan a whole bunch. Scott, thank you so much. Please come back. Let's do this again, and let's talk about how we can partner more in the future.
Look forward to it, Mike. Take care, everyone. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, and happy Mother's Day to you, Scott, and just thank you so much